setup. Who can blame you?
But that implies that I don't like it at all, and I like it.
No, I said you're not
reasons.
loving it.
That's fair.
You like what about it works. You're very happy with, but you don't
like
love it because there's stuff about it.
You
that
love
you're
it,
like,
and you want some more of it.
Were you just quoting a '90s country song?
What is happening?
That what? No, this was.
Did I? Yes, you liked it and you loved it and you wanted some more of it.
Zach was quoting a '90s country song.
Happy New Year, friends! Hi, Josh and Michelle. Hi, Jim, Hannah, my sweet Anna.
Hey. I just want you guys to know before I turn on the other camera that I'm normal. I'm a normal size human, and I have normal size hands and arms. And now I'm going to switch back.
I would love to be.
Don't like this camera.
I would love to be let out of the closet here.
Come on in, Zach. Come on in. There he is.
There we go.
There he is.
Remember when you used to hand edit all the things, and you would like swipe me in and out? Do you remember that? You would like put me right here, and then you would just like do this.
Oh yeah. Oh, that was
wait, what?
Well, back before we did the Zoom and we did the live, when you never watched it, but so all these cameras in here, we had just we had 5 cameras rolling,
right?
And then we'd edit it and actually like cut to the person that's talking and go to wide shots. It would take forever. I hired my son to do it at one point, but then we would always play games that were like Zach would say something in real time. I would be like, get the fuck out of here. And I'd do this. And then in edit, I would take his screen and like flip it off the screen.
That's pretty fun.
Yeah. Oh, it was fun. I mean, it wasted so much time. Mike's favorite thing to do would be like, because he'd like to make more work for me. He'd be like, I'm just sitting here and I'm seeing there's a bowling ball. And
Mike.
Look, there's a tractor. It's driving across the screen. And then, of course, I couldn't help myself but to then spend 2 hours making all those animations
I'll
happen.
show him. I will make all of those things come true.
Did you see how long it took me to get in here? I don't know why it's always happened.
I don't know what you're talking about.
To get in the YouTube? That's probably what's happening.
Oh, and the chat. Whoa, a bunch of people in the chat already. Why wasn't there?
I know. I missed everybody. I mean, I missed you guys and I missed everybody. It was like 2 weeks felt like a very long time to me. And I don't know if that's true for you two guys, but it did. Definitely was like, wow, it's been a long time since I recorded with Bob and Zap.
Yeah, like I worked the whole time, but then it was like I went too long without actually making a podcast. Like last Thursday when I recorded the episode we're talking about today,
hit Command Plus.
When I went to record it, I was like right down. It was Thursday is when I play cards with the old men, and they come at like 5:30. And it was like at 5:20, like I don't even know. I didn't listen, but if the final closing remarks sound rushed, it's because I was like, oh fuck. And then they did this and they did this, and then I gotta hurry up and finish recording before these guys get here. So I'll see you later.
Oh no.
I'll
have to go back and listen to it and listen
Command
for
plus. I hit Command plus.
No, just hit Command and the plus sign.
Command, but that's.
Oh, Valeria, you gotta go. Work is getting in the way.
Come on. Is that what you wanted?
Oh yeah, look at that. That's real nice. I was told
you were told a lot.
I was told yesterday that I have a DJ voice.
Oh, that's not what I was going to tell you.
I'm one of those people that just ask questions I don't want to talk about. I was scheduling my son's senior pictures, and then the guy said, of course it's a studio that I'm scheduling it with, and the guy's like, well, what's your email address? And I gave my email address, and then he's like, oh, what's NBI Studios? And I'm like, that's we do podcast stuff. Yeah. And it's like, whoa, you really do have a DJ voice, don't you?
He said in his DJ voice?
Yeah, he was like, sounds to me like you have a DJ voice, Bob. I played with the soundboard all day today.
I almost got you with it, but I stopped.
What were you going to get me with?
I don't remember. It was something. I don't remember what it was.
I was trying to think. Janet was telling a story earlier, and I was like, ooh.
How do I incorporate the Howard Dean scream?
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of like a sound in my mind. I was like, I don't have that sound. So I think I forgot to do this for you. For Zach's intro. Yo ho, a pirate's life for me. Okay. Bob, nice shirt. My husband has the same one. Thanks, Christy. It's one of my favorites. When I was in California with Janet, I told her I realized on day 3 that I could be a Carhartt commercial.
Yeah.
because I was just like, well, I better pack all my fall clothes because it's going to be cold there. And I was like wearing Carhartt socks, Carhartt jeans, Carhartt t-shirt with a Carhartt flannel over the top every day.
And now you've done 2 commercials for Carhartt by talking about this, because I think you talked about it in the last follow-up as well.
I don't know why both of you had to
are
point
giving
shit
them
like that
so
out,
much love.
Free Carhartt. Yeah, free Carhartt ads. Maybe they could be a sponsor.
I don't think you realize how much you repeat yourself.
I just try to fill space, as a content creator. You just don't want silence. And how do I know? Christy maybe wasn't here for the last time, and now she's happy to hear it.
Teresa, it's a whole dress. It's like a Western shirt dress. I said that almost like I was identifying like a bird, like I was a bird watching. I think that's a Western shirt dress.
Is that a
how rare
shirt
those
dress?
are? Click, 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 click.
Don't see those in California very often. Not anymore. Not since the gold rush of the 1940s.
Yes, indeed. Great.
1840s. 1880s.
The 1940s.
When was the gold rush?
Welcome to the
It wasn't the 1940s, I'm pretty sure.
See, case in point, Jasmine Kershaw has never made it to a live before, so she has never heard me talk about my Carhartt adventures. You're welcome, Jasmine.
This one's for you. Yeah, we dedicate that Carhartt song.
And Christy, they're a Carhartt family too. Husband and son often go to work unknowingly wearing the same color. Yeah.
Cute.
Yeah, I don't.
I
see
deem
other
that
people's.
cute.
I wear the same shirt for several days in a row. Typically. Like
I do love talking grandly about something that is embarrassing. That's one of my favorite things. I remember Zach Galifianakis used to have this bit. I mean, I'm talking like 20 years ago, where he was like, he would just do these tiny little moments where he'd be like, these are some of my favorite characters I'd like to do, but he wouldn't do the character. He just had one thing he would say, and he was like, the snob who's like, I never learned to read.
Yeah, it's basically me doing I wore the same shirt for 3 days. Listen, I need this. There's a couple things in my week that help my hygiene just a bit, and one is Zach coming here to do this follow-up because I'm like, I better go ahead and shower on Tuesday night and put on some. I mean, I still am wearing I wore these clothes at the gym this morning, but they were clean when I put them on this morning.
For Zach.
For those of you that missed it, literally Bob opened the door and says, it smells like sweaty man in here.
It does. Yeah. And that can't be all me. It's got
it's both of us. I mean, that's all that's in here, though.
Yeah, a lot of sweaty men in here.
A lot of sweaty men.
I mean, nothing.
I probably smell like wet dog because I was so like frantically trying to get my dogs dried off from the rain before I came in here. Ugh.
I'm gonna tell people to come up to you and sniff you and be like, "You smell like wet dog."
Yeah.
Janet or me?
Janet.
Oh,
just at like any con.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Be like,
Janet,
what the
she
fuck?
just said it.
Yeah. What the fuck is happening?
I'm bad about it. If I didn't have like stuff happening, like I need Wednesday to like cause me to like clean myself up a little bit and change my clothes, and then like on Friday maybe we're gonna go out to dinner and be like, I guess I better shower and change clothes.
Next time Janet's close, can we go to the Comic-Con and do cosplay, but just dress up as our favorite Janet Varney character, the two of us?
Yeah, I'll be the sheriff. Okay.
Great.
Yeah,
I'm gonna be the hand job lady in the park on Shameless.
Okay,
Shameless. I love it. I love it.
Do you have any? We should start the show here. The poor quails.
Let's do it.
Listen, the quail Teresa contribute to the stank on me because I'm out there cleaning quail shit, and you get some. You get not the shit, but the dander. What do they call the smell particles in the air that then attach themselves to you?
The smell particles.
Smell particles.
Poop.
Yeah, poop. That's the word I was looking for.
Helpful.
My quail. Love the quail. Did you say I got a couple new cages out there?
I did.
Yeah.
Trust me, I did.
Yeah, I got quite a little setup out there now.
You should have heard my kids when they came in. My kids are here today, by the way. And they came in and they're like, well, that's a lot of birds.
Oh yeah. They see in the brooder, there's like 100 of them in the brooder. Those little bastards. There was last thing before we start the show. Huh?
Did they fit in our diet?
Quail?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, we eat quail.
Oh, okay. I'm taking some home.
Yeah, I mean, there's none that you're going to take home right now.
What the fuck I eat?
But those ones that are in the brooder, there's probably 20% of those are going to be not part of the breeding program, and food. Those are food. Those become food.
I just tune you. I tune that out. Whenever you're like, I'm going on an elk hunt, I'm like, oh, he's gonna have so much fun and not shoot an elk.
He's gonna go hiking. He's going on a nice hike out in the mountains.
Yeah.
But yeah, the little baby quails. So there's in the brooder area that I have a little feeding system. So when they get bigger, that I can just like hang a food trough out thing, and they just stick their heads out through the little slots and eat that way. It gives them more room to run around. And I overestimated that I thought they were big enough not to fit through the 1-inch slots and put the trough in. And then the other morning I came out to feed them, and there was 3 of them just sitting, 3 of the smaller ones that squeezed themselves out the little slot. They were just sitting in the trough. And I don't know why, it was the cutest thing I've ever seen, because they didn't jump off.
I just snorted.
It was the lowest one. It's 6 inches off the ground. They didn't jump out of the trough. They weren't running. They're just sitting in the food trough looking at me like, this is cool. We just sit right here on the food.
Yeah.
And they just stared at me, and I just picked them up, put them back in the cage. I don't know why it was so funny to me that they didn't jump out of the trough.
Yeah.
But they squeezed their way out and then just sat there and waited for me to come to put them back in the cage.
Yeah. That's very cute.
Mm-hmm.
I wish you would have taken a picture.
All right.
Have everything.
Let's start the show. No breeding equals eating. That's exactly right, Teresa. It sounds like a t-shirt to me. Quails are friends, not food. Listen, can we talk real quick? Last thing.
Here we go. Here we go.
I've been having a problem lately with people putting an S at the end of words that don't need an S. One of them's quails. The plural of quail is just quail. That's just some knowledge for you guys that now you have that you didn't have before. So multiple quail is just quail. What's a flock of quails? It's a covey of quail. There we go. See? We're learning. It's a covey of quail. And the other thing, and this won't come up again for about 362 more days. But for the love of God, it is Happy New Year. There's only one year. There are not multiple years. It's not Happy New Years. Yeah. Stop texting me. It's, of course, none of you that I'm yelling at right now. Stop texting me Happy New Year's. Stop saying to me Happy New Year's. I didn't correct a single person because I'm growing as a human. But I want you to know that there's something in me that just rage. I want so badly to just say, no, you're saying that wrong.
Yeah.
You sound like an idiot. Stop saying Happy New Year's and just say Happy New Year. But I don't correct anybody. I wait till a week later and just
then
say
you
it in
yell
general.
at a bunch of nice people.
Is that why you're looking at me? Did I say it?
Some of the people that I know,
did I say it?
Ooh, tiny hand.
No, it wasn't you.
I was like, I mean,
this guy right over here. Yeah. But seriously, like every single person, I got like 20 people that, and again, there's also, by the way, I haven't talked to you in a year. Don't text me. Okay. Like
we're getting down to it.
I don't need some guy I worked with at the fire department 3 years ago or 10 years ago that I haven't seen in 3 years to say Happy New Year's. Do you know what Apple even knows?
Maybe,
Apple,
hey, wait, maybe he hasn't texted you in more than 1 year, and so he's like, right.
This is for all of them.
Yes.
The one thing that makes me happy is that Apple, and I should try this real quick. Let's see if I'm right. But when someone texts me Happy New Year and I open it, it goes.
Yeah, fireworks.
If they say
happen when you say Happy New Year's? Nothing.
Nada.
Yeah.
I think Apple's like, you're a fucking.
Should tell you something.
Don't stop doing that. That's not right.
And also, when you go to Nordstrom, it's just Nordstrom. It's not Nordstrom's. It doesn't belong to Nordstrom. You would just say Nordstrom.
Just Nordstrom. We have the same thing. We have a store here in the Midwest called Meijer. And everybody says, I'm going to Meijer's. I'm like, no, you're not. That's not a place. That's not even a thing. It's Meijer. You're going to the store, Meijer.
Nicole Johnson talks about almost spitting on her coffee. If you are a Patreon member,
you'll see.
You can watch Bob spit water on me.
Yeah.
Correct.
Janet said something confusing. I try to avoid spitting on the electronics intern and spit into Zach's ear. Right here. His giant ear.
Why is my head so big?
I can't even reach it.
I'll never get tired of that.
Unless you're going to two Nord. That's true. Hannah Lewis said, what if you're going to stop by a couple of different Nordstroms? Then you're going to Nordstroms.
Now then I 1000% support it. You go to those Nordstroms.
I love the support that we're getting from the chat. Nicole Johnson said she enjoyed my rant. Amy liked my rant. Where people are having the same issue. Like, let's get it out. Let's vent. This is the Festivus. Let's air your grievances. Kroger's is another one, another Midwest grocery store. It's Kroger. People say they're going to Kroger's.
Yeah.
And there, I was just gonna say the Walmart, except for if you get really into the depths of society, it's the Walmarts. We got to go to the Walmarts.
My grandma says Walmart.
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 That's just a like disability. That's not.
She's 80.
Anything.
So I mean,
Walmart.
You gotta go to the Walmart.
Popped corn. I don't have a problem with popcorn. Yeah, that's quaint.
Popcorn.
Popped corn.
Yeah,
it's harder to say.
What it is. It's popped corn. And then we shortened it to popcorn, but it was at one point popped corn. It was never Happy New Year's, nor was it Nordstrom's.
Why?
Wally World. Oh yeah, my grandparents always called it Wally World. Oh, all right. Well, this has been a useful 20 minutes.
23 minutes. It is 9:23.
It's been a while. We miss you guys. Listen, we were just talking. We've been 2 weeks. We haven't got to see each other. We haven't had the hang on.
Incoming.
Burnt down his house.
We got a hot quail order. Yep. We got a quail order coming in.
It's one of the people
I just dropped my phone on my foot.
One of the people in the chat that happens to know my number. I like to call her my J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez, the one in the chat there. Just text me Happy New Year. I appreciate that.
Very nice. Happy New Year's.
You know, we could just put your number on here so that everybody can.
How old is this chick?
Laptop.
This is what I have going on in my life. My wife just texted me, how old is this chicken? I don't even know what she's talking about. Is there a chicken in my house? What chicken?
If you guys want to text Bob, it's 269.
No, thank you. Okay. Are we ready to hear it? Ireland, Lidl, Aldi, Nalitas.
I also like that you think that I know your number off the top of my head.
Oh yeah. Go ahead, try it.
I couldn't even get close. I'm hoping that it's 269.
It's Monday.
Does Becky know there's kids in the house?
Well, she'll figure it out.
Okay.
Or she won't. There's a rotisserie.
I'll go ahead and say one that has been troubling me, and I think it's just it might be regional and it might be generational, but important. Like you say, instead of important or important, you say important. Like like
are you
important.
Saying you, like, as
that's
in
very
me
important.
Personally?
Well, yeah, no, I'm just saying that that's out there, and I will, and I hear it a lot, and I don't, but I'm like, wow, that one really stands out to me, but it's so common that I'm, you know, when it's so common, you're like, am I wrong? Is it important?
Yeah. Oh, the one that got me was in like the first year of doing the podcast was interesting. So the word interesting, and I enunciate interesting now because someone was like, because what I would say was interesting.
Oh yeah.
And people are like, you idiot, it's interesting, not interesting. And I was like, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm an idiot. I've always said it. And now I listen. Literally every person I know anywhere around here says interesting.
Yeah.
There's no T in the word at the beginning of the word. I've declared it a Midwestern thing, but I stopped doing it because I got tired of people bitching about me on the internet about that. I like them to bitch about other things.
Yeah. I'm excited because I'm just there's a delay, so I'm waiting to see if anyone agrees with me on important, but we haven't gotten to that yet.
See, I haven't heard that.
Important is different. That does feel like regional to me, and it's a little slangy, and it doesn't bother me as much. But important
wrong?
What?
So important? I say important.
Oh yeah, no, that sounds right to me.
Important.
Again, maybe it's just
important. Important. Now I can't say any words. Who says believe you me? Like I say believe you me. People around here say that. Good instead of well. Okay,
like
shall we start this thing?
I hope so.
Fun fact: the practice of dropping syllables from words, interest instead of interest.
Where are my important people? Come on, guys.
Doesn't
someone back me up here? Am I wrong?
Man, that poor football player.
This delay is killing me.
Damar Hamlin. They say he's trending up. That he's doing better now.
That's terrifying.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's terrifying.
What that they had that game on when it happened. My fam.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Terrifying.
24 years old.
I know.
Nuts. All right, let's do this thing.
Thanks, Vesna. Thanks, Amy. Okay.
Who starts?
I don't think we've been consistent about that at all. So you call it, boss.
I'll bring it in. Nobody's heard my
Okay,
voice
great.
in 2023.
I did say Happy New Year already.
Oh, did you?
I mean, you could do it again because it was from me. I said, this is not from Bob. Fuck everybody.
Cut that.
Thanks, Kelly.
Here we go. All righty, we are back. This is I know Zach already said Happy New Year, and I know you heard me say Happy New Year on Sunday, but you should know that I recorded that on Thursday and it wasn't the New Year yet. So now that this is the first time I'm recording in 2023 along with Zach and Janet.
Happy to be here, Bob. Really happy to be here.
I'm glad. And it's good to see Janet again. We got the YouTube chat going. We've had a riveting conversation there in the YouTube chat. And we're ready to start to talk about this. What did you guys think about Stipulated? I lost my mind when I realized what happened there when I was researching this. Not what I expected to find out.
I am mildly ignorant and didn't know that you could even do that. I didn't know that they could just do that. Just stipulate. They're like, we're just not like, okay.
Yeah. And you see it.
That happened in Adnan's case too, I think. There was something there was some stipulation in there that I think Robbie and Colin and Susan found that was like, oh, Christina Gutierrez was just like, oh, sure, we'll stipulate that, blah, blah, blah. And then it turned out to be
usually it comes up in
problem.
cases like this the other way where they stipulate to something that's not accurate. Like they will say, so we both agree the evidence shows that the cell phone pings put it on at the scene at 7:00. And they're like, okay, well,
maybe it was that. It might have been that. Yeah.
Something like that. We'll just stipulate to that. And then like you realize when you really look closer that, oh no, that's not accurate.
Yeah.
But stipulations are normal. I don't mean to come up to give the impression that it's not a normal thing to happen at trial. They do it to speed things up.
It's nice when you have a list of things everyone agrees on, so you don't have to like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But usually there are things like, like say the person on trial, their fingerprints and DNA were found at the scene of a murder. And like both sides will say, okay, we can't contest that. So we'll just stipulate that's true. They'll tell the jury that, and usually you'll see it because maybe their defense was going to be a self-defense.
Right. Okay. Right.
So they're like,
this happened, but the reason it happened
there's no way we can deny that he was there because of this evidence. So we'll stipulate to the evidence.
Right.
Because our case is going to be about something else entirely. But I thought, because I had heard from people and I had read. So I read through the transcripts a year ago, read through them all. I was just trying to get a feel for the case. And I remembered there being some like arguments or things said about the card being weathered and different things. And I didn't realize until I went back through in detail that those things all were just talked about in closing. So as I'm going through all of these witnesses involving the forensics, I'm just like, what the hell? How is nobody bringing any of this up? Why did the defense not bring up the witness, the expert witness from Sorensen's to explain that DNA? It was just, it was frustrating. And then when I got to the closing argument, which was not part of my plan for this episode, I was, I realized they kept saying that we've already covered this, and I'm like, well, where? And then I found the stipulations from pretrial stuff where they had stipulated to it, and then I'm like, well, how did this tie together? So that's when I went to the closing arguments, and I'm like, oh, you bastard, the prosecutor, and I don't know if it's Aki or Aki.
I think it's Aki.
Yeah,
I think that's what the family told us.
So how are they presented to the jury?
I'm so glad you asked
how this works.
Yes, I'm so glad you asked that.
So if you were to look on the case documents, I put up a stipulations thing. So what they do is they bring the jury in. And in that case, I think there was 24 stipulations, and they just read them. They're like, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, all of these things have been stipulated to, and they'll explain to them that means both sides agree that these things are fact. They're not going to argue them. You can just accept them as fact. And then they went through, like I did the parts about like the sock DNA, and it was the worst part about it is that it's misstated. Like we heard the analysis of that evidence by our DNA expert.
Right.
That's not at all. And they're like, there was DNA on the sock. Becky couldn't be excluded. Doesn't say anything about Robert and Christian. There was DNA on this part of the sock, and and Becky was part of it, and Robert and Christian, we didn't know anything. And there's DNA on the other sock, and Robert and Christian were excluded. And they're just like reading off all these things. So the jury on the record heard all of those things. But it's just, I mean, very obviously, and we're going to get into in a later episode, the jury and what they thought from a source we have about it. And you see, like, they didn't really consider the sock DNA at all. They just said, well, it could have been, part of Aki's closing argument was that, the fire hose could have changed things and this, and it doesn't matter. It could have been Javier's. It could have been. Right. And so it seemed like a nothing burger because it wasn't explained that all those people, every male that we know that's connected in her life that she saw that week was excluded. They didn't know that. It wasn't brought out. Aki knew that, and that's why I said he's the dirty bastard, because he knew that. He had the report. It was them. It wasn't the defense that did the testing in Sorensen. It was the state. Right. They knew when he said, think about it. Javier was there. Bo was there. John was there. Ron was there. Could have been any of their DNA. He knew that it absolutely was not any of their DNA on the sock. And so it was just lawyering. It was strategy that, in my opinion, badly hurt the defense.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot of questions about that and some comments as well. I don't know if you want to go ahead and jump into those, or
can we talk about the conversation we had off the air last week about the speculation over how the business card got there really quick?
Sure.
So we discussed the idea that the business card was out there, that it came from Christian, and that the idea from the state is that somehow it magically came from Christian or Robert or somehow. But I do not understand how the state can come up with the idea of that it being crumpled. Like, why would you crumple it and give it to somebody? Like, if you're going to give it to somebody, it's a solid business card. If you are taking something in your pocket and it just falls out of your pocket, it's still not crumpled. Like, it seems like a piece of garbage to me.
Right. They left the options open and kind of left it. Basically, they made a compelling case to the jury that Christian touched the card.
Mm-hmm.
And it must have fallen out of his pocket, or maybe, we don't know how it happened. But like you said, logic would say, if it's in your, why would you crumple it up and then put it in your pocket? Why would you crumple it up and then give it to somebody?
Yeah.
Like, none of the, like, as you said, the most logical thing is crumpled up means it's garbage.
Also, like, if something is crumpled up, that suggests to me as well, and again, this is all such speculation because you just start getting wider and wider out in like how much it does not potentially matter, but the idea that you have something that's sort of folded in some way and it's in your pocket, but that your pocket is so loose that, like, I mean, I just don't know that many guys who wear pants or shorts where like the pocket is so loose that when you're picking a body up, like, your pocket flaps open and something flutters out of it. Like, I understand when you're like, you reach down for something and your phone slips out because guess what? It's super slippery, or like your wallet comes out because it's bulky and it didn't fit that great in there anyway. But I just am trying to think, and again, I'm only going through my experience of gentlemen I know in my life, but I'm hard pressed to think of a scenario in which something they had that's just a little card is like somehow working its way out of a pocket and like fluttering to the ground unnoticed. It just,
especially because
that's hard for me to imagine. That doesn't mean it didn't happen, but
if memory serves, at the time of the murders, the temperature was over 70 degrees. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, it had been like 90 that day.
Yeah, like, I can't imagine anybody's wearing a coat. Mm-hmm. So you're talking about pant pockets now. Yeah. And it just seems very unlikely. And then, I had a conversation on Facebook with somebody who was talking about the idea of them wearing gloves because there was no DNA on the wheelbarrow handles, and so therefore the state surmises the killer's wearing gloves. But at the same time, to put a
I liked what there was a great, I loved your response on that Facebook post. That was very helpful.
Yeah. So, and that's what I'm getting at here is it creates a conflict for the state that I don't think the jury was aware of. And the conflict is if their theory is that Christian was wearing gloves when he committed the crime, then that says he touched the card, but we don't know where or when. There's no evidence to indicate that he touched it at the crime scene at the time of the crime. And in order to tie that card to the crime, they have to show that he was there touching it during the crime, during the commission of the crime, at the time of the crime. at the place. I'm repeating myself and rambling, but that's what creates it. If he's wearing gloves now, by default, what you're saying is, well, we're saying he touched the card, but we don't know where or when. And if that's the case, he could have touched the card at Robert's house and Becky picked it up, or he could have touched it and gave it to Becky, or whatever. There's a million scenarios where the touching of the card, because they had been in contact down in the valley, both the day before the murders and a year before.
Was Becky's DNA found on that card?
No, there was a minor contributor that was never identified as to who it was. The only,
so if it's enough to give it to Becky, she handles it from him, and still it's only got his DNA but not hers,
right? And yeah, there's all kinds of weird things with that. But more importantly, I think, was when Blaine Kern testified to the same thing that Susanna Ryan told us. The key pieces of that is that the DNA on the card itself was degraded. And I don't understand the science, but remember when she was talking, she was explaining, I can see on these peaks that there's something off on the peaks, and that looks like the DNA has been degraded. And then that was brought up at trial, and Blaine Kern himself said, who was the owner of Hit Laboratories, said, yeah, like you would see that kind of degradation if something had been outside for a year. And it's like, hello,
right?
Like that's exactly, you don't get that. They never showed any evidence that Christian touched that card at the crime scene at the time of the crime, and in fact presented a theory that he was wearing gloves, which by default says he didn't touch the card at the crime scene at the time of the crime.
Right. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I explained it better on Facebook than I just did here.
No, I think that you did it both times. You did it both times. Well, let's get into these questions, because I think we've started to hit on some of that, and we may even come across a couple that we've since answered. But let's start with Teresa's question. Teresa, I see you in the chat as well. Hi. My voice got so high just then. Teresa says, question about the fingerprint analysis. Is there, and by the way, I want to say, I was flying home from Texas last night, and I could only get my phone to go on the internet. My computer would not allow me to get on to the airport Wi-Fi or the airplane Wi-Fi. So there is more paraphrasing here, because I was literally holding my phone, like typing people's questions. So I was in a position where I sort of needed to paraphrase a little bit more than I usually do. But Teresa, all that being said, Teresa has a question about the fingerprint analysis. Says, is there any sort of computer or non-human process that could be used for, let's say, maybe a less biased determination? I say that not biased necessarily in the direction of wanting it or needing it to be Christians, but just in the way that human interpretation of a series of patterns may be suggested, by some kind of outside force, or just a matter of opinion. So I think she's wondering, like, is there a way for that to be maybe a little more scientific nowadays than just looking at a picture and going like, this looks like it matches, this matches this. It's my opinion that it matches. Right. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, keep in mind that analysis was done in 2018, so it wasn't like it was a long time ago when they matched him. I don't know the answer to that. I've only seen it it was about the same time, 2018, when I was at the fingerprint lab and saw how they did it, and they were doing manual comparisons, on the computer screen. But I did have just today, one of our listeners is a latent fingerprint examiner, had sent me an email and said they're willing to come on and explain how that process works. So I'll default till that, and we'll have, because I'm clearly not an expert. So we'll wait till we have an expert come on. Yeah. And I want to mention that from our previous discussion, somebody, Mitch from on the YouTube chat said, regarding the DNA on the wallet, says maybe it was in his wallet for a year, then he took it out and gave it to Becky. Maybe. The key word in what you just said is maybe. The state didn't prove when he put that DNA on the card, or when the fingerprints got on the card. And
why is Becky not on? Or why is Becky's DNA not on it?
Right. If Becky's the one that crumbled it, you would expect her DNA to be fresh and all over it.
Right.
And it's not. She maybe is a minor contributor,
especially if it's crumpled. I mean, if it's crumpled, you're really working it.
Yeah. Yep. So I don't know, but that's the key. That's the point I'm making, it's maybe there's a million, especially if they're putting forth a theory that they're wearing gloves, then it opens up the door for he could have touched that card at any time, at any place.
Yeah. Jim says, can we see the fingerprints? Just following up on Teresa's question, can we see the fingerprints? And how, if at all, it's true, I don't remember you touching on this in the episode, but how was the difference in that fingerprint identification addressed by the defense, if at all? Like kind of scrutinizing more, like how were people excluded and then nothing has changed in the technology, but now they're definitively his? That was never really drilled down into?
Yeah, it's just that was kind of the point of the same thing with the DNA and stock. It was stipulated to. One of the stipulations was that in 2007, an identification was done that excluded Christian and Robert from the fingerprints on the card, and so it was just read to the jury, and that's so. And again, frustrating. They had Jennifer Sniff there to testify. What I was expecting and what I think should have been done is, in 2007, you analyzed these prints and said that you had a comparable print. You compared it to Christian's fingerprints and determined they didn't belong to him. What process did you go through to do that? But instead, what we heard was, we're not going to get into what you did because it's already been stipulated to, and they moved on. And so in the list of all the stipulations was, oh, by the way, there was a previous fingerprint analysis done that excluded Christian and Robert, and they moved on. That was it.
Okay. And in terms of Jim asking if there are images of the fingerprints that can be looked at just for curiosity's sake, if not professional analysis, is that?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have the Photoshop shop images. We have the exhibits where they put up and showed, and I'll try to dig those out and get them up, where they showed the points that they found that matched up, but it's hard to, for a layman, it doesn't mean a whole lot, at least to me.
Right. Jennifer, I thought, had a really interesting sort of statement that I feel like if we've talked about this or if we've said it this explicitly, it's been a while. But I enjoyed her. I think we kind of know the answer to this, but I think it's good to restate and kind of look at it from this perspective. Jennifer H. says, so there's no evidence at all of Robert. How was he convicted?
Good question. So, yeah.
I looked at that and I was like, I mean, I feel like we all have sort of accepted, like, okay, well, these are the hoops. Like, if it's Christian's card and Christian says he's never been there, then it must have been Robert, and Robert was the ex, and he must have been the one that was obsessed. Like, there's no, if there's no interest in Christian to hurt Becky, he has to only be there as the friend, right? Am I?
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
So their theory was that Robert did it because Robert was supposed to go on the hike, and they think that the body was moved in the wheelbarrow, which lines up with there being a hike. But there's zero evidence that Robert was there. So they find the business card, which is why I say it is the linchpin of the state's case. The business card has Christian's DNA and fingerprint on it. And since Robert says he was with Christian that night, and we don't know where he was because he had no cell phone service at the time, that's how they make the connection. Without the business card, there's nothing. Right. And of course, we know there's all kinds of problems with the business card, and as we've just discussed, there's no way to show, and the state was not able to show, that Christian was at that crime scene. They can only show that he touched that card at some point in time at some place.
Oh God, the amount of sleepless nights that anyone who believes those guys to be innocent must have had over, and must continue to have over, the randomness of that business card, and I'm sure I'm sure someone in the chat is going, exactly right, it's not random. And I get it. I get why you were saying that. And I'm, by the way, I don't even know if you're saying it because I haven't looked at the chat, but this idea of, like, I mean, it's kind of like it's like the Nisha call in a way, it's like, yeah, like, oh my God, all of this stuff is all sort of being, pointed in this direction. Like, why did the business card have to be out there, or if it was out there at all, or but yeah. Like, just that feeling that the families must have of, like, it means nothing yet it means everything, yeah, or exactly. It means everything yet it means nothing. You put it in whatever order you want, but
yeah, that's exactly right. It's the thing that put him in prison for life.
Okay. Teresa says, was the jury polled on factors that led to guilt? I can't remember if we talked about that before.
I don't know that the jury was polled, but like I said, we'll get into that later.
Okay. And then we have a kind of a cluster of great comments and questions around this idea of being dishonest in your closing argument. There was a cool couple of conversations happening outside of the follow-up in the Facebook, in our Facebook. But Rachel says, found it interesting that the state's closing argument explained the DNA on Becky's sock as transfer, but the business card could only mean Robert and Christian committed the murder. Does dishonest closing argument allow for any kind of appeal? We'll start with that one.
So both sides are given a lot of latitude when it comes to closing arguments. The judge will inform the jury that closing arguments are not evidence. They're not to consider what they're saying as evidence. And people have asked me, like, well, can you object? Why didn't they object to this? The answer is yes, you can object during closing arguments, but it is very much frowned upon. In fact, when I have seen it happen, I literally will say, like, in the transcripts, like, you're like, I'm sorry, I hate to object during closing, but I have to object because that's a misstating of the evidence or whatever. And even in that case, usually the judge will just say, the jury knows this is not evidence and your objection's overruled. They give them a lot of latitude. Now, what you cannot do during, and the reason they might object then, what you cannot do is misstate evidence. And by that, I mean, evidence is only evidence that is in the record. So in this case, we know that there is evidence that Javier and Bo and John and Ron were ruled out as a contributor of the DNA on the sock.
Mm-hmm.
But that evidence did not come into trial, and therefore it does not exist for the purposes of the trial. And therefore, it's not a misstating of trial evidence for the prosecutor to surmise that it could have been them. And so there's a series of things going on there. One is, in my opinion, they made a mistake by not putting on an expert and getting that stuff into evidence. And then there was the prosecutor just being dishonest in the fact that he knew what he was doing and he did it anyway.
Jordan says, has Bob talked to the defense attorneys, the defense attorneys at the time to find out more about why this wasn't pursued, or the approach was taken?
I've talked to one of them. I've talked to Christian's attorney, John Dolan, and I did an interview with him that I'll air at some point. But at that point, I wasn't aware. I mean, I just kind of made this discovery last week. So when I talked to him a year ago, I didn't know this.
Okay. And with that in mind, Amy and Susan and Kristen and I think Sarah all sort of are wondering, would the decision to not pursue the sock stuff more, does that lead to the possibility of an ineffective assistance of counsel argument?
It's tough. I mean, I want to make sure I put in the disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. So, take this for...
Boy, if anyone listening to this thinks you're a lawyer, I'm so sorry. I don't know how you got that impression.
Yeah, definitely not a lawyer. But from my understanding, it'll be an argument you can make, but I think it would probably be a tough argument because all the state has to do is claim that it was strategy. And you can't, we went through that with Adnan's case where, they didn't call any alibi witnesses, and they filed an ineffective assistance of counsel claim because Gutierrez didn't call any alibi witnesses, but it was said, well, that was a strategic decision, right. And if it's a strategic decision, then you can't make a claim on it. So I think that's probably what would happen here. I don't know. I mean, it may still happen. Right. They may make the argument, and I may be wrong about this, but I would assume that the counter to that would be, well, they had a strategic reason for doing that, for allowing the stipulations and not putting the expert on.
Right. Okay. And that kind of answers Rossi and Jason's questions too about the sort of wondering why that wasn't accentuated more, or what to do in the present day. Jordan says separate thread discussing the amount of plan. Oh yeah, this was really interesting. And I did read the other whole other post about this, but Jordan said there was a separate thread discussing the amount of planned / canceled trips on the weekend that the murders happened. Were Vicky and John supposed to go somewhere? That we heard that at one point. We heard that Vicky was supposed to go somewhere at one point. We heard that John's son was supposed to be there at some point, and all of those things got canceled. So this sort of circling question of who should have been expected to be there on Sunday evening, and by whom? Who would know, and who would expect who to actually be there? And so, then that sort of trails into with that in mind, Becky being potentially a surprise. Did they not know her car would be there? Who would that be? So there was a lot of discussion that I swirled into when I was reading the Facebook posts about this idea of her not being the target, but still potentially knowing her car's there. All that kind of stuff was very interesting, and there was some really good discussion happening around there. I guess that's not really a question, but.
Well, I missed that thread, but I'll have to read it. But it's an interesting thought. I don't think so. John and Vicky were supposed to go on vacation during the 2 weeks prior and didn't. Yeah. I don't think anybody thought John wasn't going to be there that weekend. Okay. Vicky definitely wasn't supposed to be there. As far as who knew that, her friends from work knew that. Tiffany knew that. I don't know who else thought that she was going to be gone. As far as Becky's concerned, she works at night. It looks like she probably wasn't supposed to be to work till 11 o'clock that particular night. But leading up to this, it sounds like for weeks she had pretty much been living down in the valley with Jacob. She was staying with him. So there's a lot of open ends there where people, it's hard to know who knew what and when. That Becky was going to be up there, that she wasn't down at Jacob's anymore. She wasn't at Javier's, and she wasn't at work. All places where someone who just say maybe knew, let's just say someone had been kind of, paying attention to what's going on over the previous couple of weeks. If someone was planning this, I think it would be reasonable to think, well, it's always just John and Vicky there. And then anybody that knows them a little more intimately would be like, well, Vicky's supposed to be gone, and it's just going to be John there. But yeah, it's an interesting thought. I hadn't really thought about it until just now.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting too. And when you think of it as being the kind of weekend where we don't know how common this is, but in my life, it's not terribly common that within a small household, several different factors were supposed to be in play and then got canceled for an actual trip out of town. Maybe that was more common for them, but it was really interesting.
Real quick for you to do that, I just want to address from the YouTube chat. Mitch is talking in there with some other people about the DNA, and they ask, why aren't they pushing the issue now? And they haven't submitted anything for additional testing even now. I would just say, Mitch, you have no idea what's going on right now with their post-conviction attorneys and what wheels are in motion. So just because you don't see something happening right now doesn't mean it's not happening.
Okay. Lynn says.
I'm sorry. I hate to keep interrupting you.
That's okay.
Also, I'm not saying I know exactly what's happening right now. I'm just saying they're in the process of working up their habeas, and so stands to reason there are definitely things happening right now.
And as a defense attorney, those are other questions that came up in the follow-up thread, which were, as a defense attorney, you're not placed in the same position that a prosecutor is, where you can just be like walk into the office and be like, I'm going to go ahead and grab those socks and I'm going to head over and get those tested. I'll let you know what comes of that. Right. So it's,
yeah. It's they're going to have to either get permission from the prosecutor or file a motion with the judge to get testing done. There's procedures that have to happen.
Gotcha. Lynn says, was either set of unidentified male DNA on the socks matched anywhere else or on any other evidence?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Just Lynn was wondering, just for clarification, the unidentified male DNA on the socks, did that show up anywhere else? It wasn't
another piece of evidence?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think so. That's some of the analysis that we want to do. So we have these unknown profiles from the socks, unknown file from the pen, and there's more from the pant cuff. So I don't know if those are the same, if they match up. That would be a Susanna question. And hopefully, this is something that the defense actually hires somebody for and digs deeply into. So we'll have those answers.
Okay. And I think this comes up and has come up almost every week since we started talking about the socks. But since it keeps getting asked by multiple people in the follow-ups, I just want to do it again. Just to clarify, to your knowledge, nothing was ever run through CODIS from the socks at any time.
Correct.
Yeah.
Nothing in the case was run through CODIS, period.
Nothing in the case was run through CODIS at any time, period. Lynn, I see that you mentioned that you saw somewhere that the police tested Robert and Christian's guns that they had then owned later for blood with negative results. That's not something that we've talked about at all.
No, we haven't covered any of that stuff yet.
Okay.
I'm gonna in the stipulations.
Oh, yeah. That's what it is. Okay, so that's where you got it. Of course, that's where she got it.
Yeah.
Lynn,
yeah, there's nothing like you.
I haven't read that yet.
You've heard all the inculpatory evidence there is to hear, other than like. Well, I say that's not true because we haven't covered the Jeremy Witt, the informant yet, which we'll be getting into, and I guess it depends on how you look at it. There's pictures of the guys around a bonfire shooting guns, and posts they've made or letters they've written, basically where they're trying to say based on this they're pyromaniacs and gun fanatics. So that stuff.
Right.
Comes up, but nothing. But there's, as far as anything that connects them to the actually tangibly connects them to the crime, you've heard it.
Yeah. Okay. So we don't have to. I feel like we're going to probably address that, even though it was in the stipulations. It feels like we are going to talk more about that. So maybe I'll let that go for now. Talking about the ownership of those guns.
Yeah.
And Teresa, also people looking at the information surrounding the autopsies and evidence. There's some discussion about Roxy sandals being described as having been found on or around John, and many people are familiar with Roxy as a brand and understand it to be female oriented. So there were a lot of people who sort of perked up their ears or eyes when they looked at the document and said, wait a minute, that doesn't really make sense, and are just looking for more clarification on that. Was he wearing them? Were they near him?
I was very unfamiliar. I've never even heard of that brand before.
I definitely have.
Is it only women's sandals?
I think it's like the women's division of Quiksilver, unless I'm mistaken, and I could be for sure. But I believe it is the sort of the women's side of Quiksilver, which can be unisex or can be male female. But then Roxy tends to be more of the female directed design. I was surprised. I was one of the people who was like, Roxy sandals. I absolutely imagine a girl wearing Roxy's.
Yeah, I believe they said they were on his feet, or they were collected from, like, they were in his body bag. Because I don't think I think the bottom of the legs were kind of burned off. But yeah, it certainly seemed from what was presented at trial that they were like, those were on his feet when he was killed. Because I was trying to get an idea. So she's wearing, I think, a thermal shirt and sweatpants. You couldn't really tell much from his clothing, but he's wearing sandals. So it seemed like, okay, well, obviously not in bed yet if he's still wearing sandals, because, obviously you would take your sandals off if you go to bed. And we'll get into this. Somebody asked in the YouTube chat when I'll be presenting my arson investigation soon. This week I'm working on Leclerc's testimony. I don't want to jump around to different topics until we finish this one.
Okay. What's happening? Oh, you're coughing.
Okay, so yeah, Roxy is a women's division. It's a company called Board Writers Inc. They own Quiksilver, they own Roxy, they own DC Shoes, Element. I mean, they own a lot of stuff.
But it's for sure a women's.
Everything I've said says women's. It's for young girls. Type
into the Google Roxy men's sandals.
You're seeing it happen right now, on the job, in the moment investigation happening via a tool we call Google. For those of you who are unfamiliar, it's a search engine, and you might find it useful for yourself if you are an armchair detective.
Kelly, you're gonna have to clean all this up. Right there, it says Roxy sandals for men.
Yeah, but these are all like not.
Go to the eBay thing there.
You're gonna trust eBay?
eBay is a an online auction site that has been around for quite some time.
None of these are Roxy sandals from
So we'll clean up all that stuff and then come back, and Zach, you can very clearly state that it doesn't look like there's Roxy sandals for men.
It doesn't look like there's Roxy sandals for men. If you Google Roxy sandals for men, a lot of stuff comes up, and when you start clicking the links, it sends you to other companies.
Okay. So that's very interesting that they assume, of course, there's not a size or anything on there, that they said that those were on John, but it appears to be unlikely. I mean, who knows? Maybe he's got small feet and he slipped into, and maybe Vicky had larger feet and he slipped into Vicky's flip-flops to go do something.
Please, I enjoy putting on the boat-sized shoes of my partner just because it's funny, and try to shuffle around in those outside for laughs. So
yeah, that as a man with large feet, it's not as nearly as much fun going the other way, trying to slip into my wife's tiny shoes.
Makes sense. Okay. So Kristen, shout out to Kristen. I'm so glad you posted this, because this is something that I think you and I were texting about a little bit, Bob. And then I was like, wait, I'll save this because I'm sure we'll talk about it on the follow-up. But Kristen says, can you explain your theory on Becky's shoes? If she climbed out the window, do you think she was grabbed there and one shoe came off? And then I would add to that, I'm still sort of puzzling over, and I know there's just a lot of answers we don't have, but as we sort of expounded on this idea of her being upstairs and in some way or other trying to escape either the fire or the killers, where the shoe would have come off and where a potential shot would have been fired, or where she would have been caught and then eventually placed in the wheelbarrow. Do you have sort of a picture in your mind of what that process looks like, or is it more nebulous at this point?
Well, there's obviously a bunch of different scenarios. I don't think, because of the way her socks rolled down, I don't think that like her shoe just came off when she was leaving. So what I picture is, and keep in mind, we don't know that she was shot. We don't know how she was killed. I picture that she was in a struggle and oftentimes when someone's in a struggle like that, you'll see, and we've seen it, and Jim Clemente and I have talked about this a lot of times. It's actually how he helped explain some Quail Gove's injuries. People will tend to go to their back because they don't want their back to their offender. So if she's like on the ground, I picture her on the ground, on her back, fighting off, kicking at the person who's attacking her, and trying to grab her feet. I feel like that's how the sock or the shoe probably came off. We see, obviously, there are signs of some forensic sophistication. I mean, the lighting of the fire in the house and the lighting of the fire on Becky indicates that these people, whoever did this, are at least aware of the fact that they are leaving evidence on the bodies. And I think that's why, Becky's body was lit on fire. So I think it stands to reason that either, if the shoe came off and they burned her, that they would take the shoe and either throw it back into the fire and get out of there, or just take it's small, just take the shoe with them when they take off there. But it doesn't, the way the socks rolled down, I don't think like the shoe just came off. I think it probably came off in a struggle. And I'm wondering if there wasn't like suffocation, or, they're just literally holding it. The thing about the gunshot is, you don't have blood, but that's, they didn't look for it around in the area where I think that a shot would have happened. We also don't have any neighbors saying they heard a shot. And we've talked about before that as far as John and Vicky getting shot inside a house with insulated walls, and then hundreds of yards of air gap before the next house with insulated walls, then someone inside may not have heard those shots at all. And if they did, they wouldn't have been loud and jarring, certainly. And it sounds like from that area, hearing gunshots wouldn't be the weirdest thing to hear either. So they may not have noticed. Right. But I think of like in the dark, a loud crack shooting outside probably would have been noticeable. So I'm kind of leaning away from her being shot, but we don't know. But yeah, I think that it probably came off in a struggle. And to address real quick before you jump in, Zach, to address just a quick thing from YouTube. Somebody made they were in the discussion there. Somebody said, well, I think it was Teresa said that if John was wearing Roxy's, then it also stands to reason that he could also own or be wearing a pair of Vans. And the only thing I want to address is somebody made a post and they were going through like the list of reasons why they think that the business card was important. And in their post, they said, John and Vicky don't wear Vans and DG or whatever the other brand was, or DVS shoes. I want to point out that's not true. I'm not saying they do.
Yeah.
But we have no idea. I mean,
no, we have no idea.
In a couple of weeks, I'm going to turn 44 and I own 2 pairs of Vans that I wear regularly. I mean, it's not, and Vicky worked in the shoe department of Macy's. So like, I just want to make clear, we can't say
for sure
John didn't or wouldn't wear Vans or DVS shoes, or that Vicky wouldn't wear either. We can't say that. We have no idea. They still are, but particularly then were extremely popular shoes.
Right.
So certainly they could have worn them.
Way to slip in that your birthday's coming up in a couple of weeks.
Talking about Becky's cause of death, and you were saying that you don't believe she was shot. I've had the displeasure of seeing the autopsy photos, and the only spot, they say that there's no gunshot wounds on her body present. So there's one spot of her body that is missing, that is burned away.
Right.
But I feel like if you were the spot that is that is gone, if you were shot there, that's a long, I mean, you would die, but it's a long, I mean, this isn't an instant death.
Yeah, it would have been, they may have had
shot in the
liver. It would be
the
most vital organ that could be hit, that wouldn't have hit ribs.
Being where the shot was and the part of her body that's not present. I mean, that's not a die quickly.
Right
there. I don't think it's the same kind of scene you would see.
Yeah, I don't think so either. It's still certainly a possibility. But also that would be a lot of blood loss.
Yes, exactly.
For if she, because what he's talking about, in the left side of her torso, there's an area that's completely burned away. All that remains is the ribs, which is part of how the Elaine Pope knew that she hadn't burned longer than 20 minutes, was because the ribs were still intact, but the flesh had burned away. Yes, so that would mean the shot would have went in under the ribs, and then there's all if it's just intestines and gallbladder, other things like that, that's a very slow death. Liver would be quicker, within a matter of minutes at least, but also would be a lot of blood loss if that was the case. So yeah, I'm leaning towards, there's certainly studies out there that show that you can be strangled without breaking the hyoid. They assume not strangled because the hyoid wasn't broken, but also there's the possibility of just being suffocated, somebody just holding their hand over your mouth and nose. There's a lot of possibilities there.
Yeah, Quail, that's just the feeling of going round and round a little bit with the forensics on Becky is it's so maddening. I mean, I remember you saying that at the very beginning of this whole process, like just talking about that crime scene and trying to put the pieces together of what happened and in what order. I feel like we've made a lot of progress on some of it, and then some of it is just still so baffling, and not knowing if there's space between people being killed and their bodies being lit on fire. Just all of that it's can make you go crazy. We're basically finished. I wanted to shout out Jocelyn and Kelly. You both had pointed out in the Facebook about this idea of being shot outside, and that being the difference between being shot inside and outside, and being able to be heard and things like that. And also the possibility of Becky trying to scream or something like that, which actually could lend more to the idea of being suffocated, maybe, if you're trying to stop any sort of noise.
Yeah, and that's kind of what leans me in that direction. Is I'm just trying to think practically, if this is a scenario, if the guys, if the killers are out there, they think they're done, they've killed John and Vicky, they've lit the house on fire, they're just gathering stuff up so they can get out of there, and then all of a sudden somebody comes jumping out a window, what are things, you have to get control of that person, which requires physical restraint. If there wasn't a gun, let's take a gunshot out of the mix for now, just because of all those factors we just talked about. But so you have to get control of them to stop them from escaping. That involves a physical altercation. It's very typical in a situation like that for somebody to lay down on their back and use their legs to kick the person away from them, which would explain the shoe coming off. But then the other thing is, what do you have to do to stop people from being alerted? Is stop them from screaming, which then stands to reason a hand over the face, the mouth and the nose, And I would suspect more that just thinking of human nature, and this is tea leaves, just to be clear, it's not anything that's evidence. But if someone's screaming, I think your reaction is to put your hand over their mouth more than start like strangling them, on their throat. You're going to try to stop them from making noise. Right. And I could see them pinning down, and then it continues. And again, this is speculation. I'm very clear. This is just speculation about possible hypotheses of what could have happened here. But if they're holding their hand over her mouth, then what is she going to be doing with her hand? She's going to be clawing away, trying to get the hand off of her mouth, which then puts the killer's DNA underneath her fingernails. And I know that you guys haven't seen these photos because we don't share photos like this, but Zach has seen them. You'd notice very disproportionately that her hands and fingers are burned away more so than the rest of her body. Of course, there's the part where the fat would then liquefy and render into the wheelbarrow and burn away that part of her torso, but her hands are just completely burned away. Like the tip or like the top, the second half of her fingers are gone, which to me seems like, okay, everything in the scenario we just laid out, if that happened and the people know, like, God, she just scratched all over my arm, and so now my DNA is under her fingernails, I could see them pouring gasoline or lighter fluid or whatever it was directly all over her hands. And that again shows why they weren't maybe thinking about the socks, the ankles, the lower legs, that they're not like so forensically sophisticated that they're like, I could leave touch DNA all over her. They're like, my skin is under her fingernails, so I need to burn those away so that I'm not caught, and then didn't think about touch DNA. Those things all, and again, it's just a hypothetical scenario, but those things all fit together for me and they make sense in my mind. And it doesn't mean that's what happened, but it's the only scenario that does make sense in my mind.
It's interesting too. I'll just throw this out there while we're talking about the idea of close-up contact, the potential of scraping someone and getting their DNA and giving them scratches. We're talking about the late summer. We're talking about 90-degree weather. Yeah. The idea that your Javiers, your Beaux, your Nicorlines, your Roberts go in to be questioned or show up at the crime scene. If I, living from a hot climate as I do and have, if somebody on a 95-degree day came up to me wearing a long sleeve shirt, I would be like, what are you hiding? What's wrong with you? Or they would not be wearing that, and they would be wearing short sleeves, and they would have zero evidence on them whatsoever of any kind of a struggle and any kind of scratching or anything like that at all. So it's interesting that, obviously I can't speak for Christian because they didn't bother talking to him, right away, or he just didn't talk to them right away or whatever. But Robert was at the police station on a hot day. I mean, I just, and no, never hear anyone. They say that, can I look at your footprints? Can I look at your shoe prints to Javi? But, no one says like, can you lift up your sleeves? I want to see if you have scratches on you or anything like that.
Yeah. And that's something we've never discussed before, but even with the state's theory is that there was something went wrong and there was a struggle out in the desert. Right. And that's how, the area of disturbance and all that, you would expect to see defensive wounds or wounds that were created in defense on the perpetrator. And what we do see from now, we don't have photos of everybody. Like we have no photos from like right afterwards of Javier, but we have a picture of Beau Nash from that day standing. I don't think I published it, but he's standing out by the crime scene when he's being interviewed. He's wearing shorts and a t-shirt. We have video of Robert's interview. He's wearing shorts and a t-shirt in his interview on the day after. Like I said, Javier, you can only assume it's a 90-degree day that he's probably wearing shorts and a t-shirt. I don't know. But what we know for sure for Robert, at least, is if there was this struggle, then how did he get away from that without having scratches and claws on his arms and his hands or his face or his neck? It just becomes harder and harder for me to jump through the mental hoops that you have to jump through to make this theory of the states make any kind of sense.
I agree. And Montana, I know there's a delay, but that means that you are thinking exactly what I was thinking, because I see you brought up the scratches as well. That's that's definitely something. I want to shout out also Dez's post on Facebook. You kind of getting more into the arson investigation. You brought up that you were sort of reinvestigating it from scratch. And Amy, I saw you posted something about it in the YouTube chat as well. Some curiosity about where you are with that and if that's something that we can expect to see forthcoming. Because I probably will save Dez's post for that if it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's definitely going to happen. I struggled a little bit this week trying to figure out where to, because I want to get into that. I've started it, but I haven't really, my process of whatever I'm investigating in a particular week is part of the process of writing the episode. That's why a lot of times they seem like they're kind of in real time, is because they are. So I've started that process, but I've decided, as I mentioned earlier, we've been on the business card, on this investigation, on these forensics. So I thought before we jump to the arson and then back, I want to stay on this. I want to see this through to the end. So what we have coming on Sunday is I'm starting to break down Gary LeClaire's trial testimony. It may be a two-parter. I'm still in the process of breaking, because I'm pulling out throughout that test. His main testimony is 174 pages long, and then he was recalled. And throughout there, what I'm trying to is so you guys will all be able to follow along with it in the testimony. And they're talking about, when we're looking at the People's 129, this photo. So I'm like pulling out all those photos and saving them and labeling them in a way that when you're listening to the episode, you can go on our webpage and look at the photos they're looking at. So that's where we're going now. I'm thinking it'll probably end up being a two-parter, as it's Wednesday now, and I still haven't started the writing process because I'm still going through the testimony and breaking all that stuff out. But my plan is, after we get through LeClaire's testimony, then after that, I want to do the arson investigation thing, and then just kind of looking forward to what we have. I've got at least an episode I want to do about the informant that became a huge part of the trial, Jeremy Witt. We're going to talk about that whole situation, and then I just lost my train of thought with the other thing that I was just.
Well, we got to hear about all of the other circumstantial sort of goes to character and motive stuff that I, for one, am not looking forward to, but.
Yeah. And so we got to, we're going to go through that stuff. I don't remember what else I was going to say, but there's more to come. We have plenty more to come.
The last thing I want to say is I just want to acknowledge, because we haven't really mentioned it at all, the Bonash bonus interview. Is there, I think the general question, I saw one person stated it really nicely and cleanly, and I apologize that I didn't write it down, but the sort of general idea of like, what did you get from that interview, if anything? Like what was your sort of takeaway from that interview, if anything?
Nothing. What I heard was someone who was, it's 10 years later, someone whose, opinions have been formed based on every rumor and news report and everything that's happened over that time, trying to be helpful. And it just, it was, y'all know, it was a tough interview to listen to. He's just got a lot to say. And I think he thinks he's being helpful by sharing what his theories are on all this stuff, but there's nothing there to grab onto. I think, you've got to look back to his interviews on the day of and the week, closer to it, to know what were actual memories and weren't, as opposed to things that, seeped into his mind over the years. Because you hear certainly that he has his suspicions about Javier, but also he knows that Robert and Christian were arrested, and so he's looking at both of those directions. But I don't think there's anything we can really glean from it.
Yeah. For me, it almost just kind of reminded me, because we've heard so much personal stuff about so many of the people involved in this case that are even tangentially involved in the case. It's just like we all go through highs and lows in our lives, and I'm not making a specific assessment about that interview, but in general, because it was a little chaotic, because there was a lot going on, there were family members there and dogs barking and photos being taken, which was a very interesting question someone asked, was like, or someone taking photos during that? It sounded like there were little flashbulb, little pictures being taken going off. That seemed mysterious. There was still a lot happening there, but even just, those references to things happening in the past, we all go through a lot of ups and downs, some of us more than others, and certainly in certain eras of our lives and ages. And so my heart kind of goes out to, we say this every time, but my heart just goes out to everybody who was involved in this, even in small ways, who just had everything lay bare, and now we're picking it all apart. And sometimes I feel real bad about that.
Yeah, that's tough. And with that, I think we'll end things here. Zach, you have anything else to add?
Nope.
All right. Well, thanks for your Googling skills.
Well, I got you.
Very helpful.
We're going to solve this thing by Google
right now. And again, make sure to tune in on Sunday for at least the first part of Gary LeClaire's testimony, and we'll just keep on marching on. Hope everybody had a good new year, and let's get back to work. Thanks, everybody.
Sounds good.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
everybody. Happy New Year.
All right, we have to end on our audio. What are you doing?
I was just gonna hit a button.
No, don't touch buttons.
I want to touch a button.
YouTube chat, thank you guys very
Thanks,
much for your
y'all.
participation. And I'm going to go ahead and end the